Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be talking about a California school child who can no longer bring the American flag into school. We'll tell you why. We'll also be talking about how the federal government is mandating the replacement of street signs across the country. And we'll be getting into some cops who shot out the windows of their own squad car. That plus a whole lot more coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
Welcome to episode 182 of Free Minds TV, where we consistently challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. As always, it is Toby here.
And Nick.
All right, Nick, we have a lot to get into this week. We had last week off, so we've got the stories piling up to get into, and there are a lot of them. We had to be a little bit choosy this week about which ones we took, because there were just so many to get into. I want to start off with a story. We are going to be getting into this California schoolboy who can't bring the American flag to school and why, as well as some other stories about street signs, which is going to cost America billions upon billions and billions of dollars. We'll be getting into those stories, but I did want to start with the story about the police officers who shot out the windows of their own squad car. That isn't really the full point of the story. The full point of the story is what they were trying to shoot at. They were trying to shoot at a van that was simply backfiring. Let's get into it. Backfires from broken down van draw bullets from Kansas City police officers. The Kansas City Star reporting. Philip Ransom thought he had trouble Thursday night when his old van broke down on the side of the road, booming out backfires. Little did he know, his troubles were just beginning. Two Kansas City police officers mistook the van's backfires for gunshots. What did they do? They began firing at it. Fortunately, Mr. Philip Ransom was not hit. At least 3 bullets did hit his van, although he does not know how many bullets were actually fired. A department spokesman said the officers...
Probably like 70 or something. The police have a reputation for not always being the best shots.
Lots of bullets shooting at this van. A department spokesman confirmed that Ransom was unarmed and was not shooting. It was just his van backfiring. The officers have been placed on administrative leave while the incident is being investigated. The poor Mr. Philip Ransom almost made it home. He was just 1 block from his house before his van did finally break down and die. Lucky for him, though, he was afraid the van would catch on fire, so when it started booming and backfiring, he jumped out of the van. That's what saved his life, because he was a little bit away from it when the cops showed up and started shooting at it. The officers originally thought that he was shooting back at them because their patrol car windows were shot out. But after it was determined that he was unarmed, the preliminary investigation here shows that the officers, in fact, shot out the windows of their own squad car. Ransom said a police attorney had called him asking about the damage to his van, which is currently still sitting in his driveway. Mr. Ransom also is a little bit disappointed here because the officers never even apologized for the incident. You know, business as usual. But then again, he is happy to be alive, as he should be. So...
You know, usually, just as a disclaimer for everybody out there watching, whether you're a police officer or not, usually when you fire a bullet through a window, the glass breaks.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that a bullet's necessarily coming back at you. It's probably a safe bet that if you aim a gun at something through a window and you pull the trigger,
the glass broke. They must be shooting at us.
The glass is going to break.
More bullets. Here's another thing, police officer or not. How about you have an idea of what you're shooting at before you just start aimlessly firing away?
Right, because even if you say, oh well, they thought there really might have been gunshots coming from the van. Well, they don't know who else could have been in the van.
Is there a hostage situation here?
Are there kids in the van?
Is the van
Thankfully,
full of
there
babies?
weren't. Right, yeah. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Oh, loud noises. Let's shoot at them. I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense if
in a video game, Nick. That makes sense
in a video game. Or I could see if you're. I don't know if it's Normandy. You know, if you're driving the Nazis out of France and you hear booms.
But even then, friendly fire.
Right, you probably want to make sure it's not your guys you're shooting at. So in any circumstance, you probably just don't want to shoot randomly at any loud noise that happens to pop up.
Yeah, it's a good rule of thumb.
I think they'd call that negligence or recklessness.
I'd say so.
I don't even think they'd believe a citizen if they said, well, I heard booms coming from the van, so I just started shooting at it because I thought they were
in that direction. In the police officer's defense here, it does say that there was a 911 911 call placed because a neighbor thought that they heard gunshots. So it wasn't just the police officers who heard it as a boom. So just trying
Probably
to
didn't expect the police to show
full
up and just start
disclosure.
shooting randomly into vehicles. They didn't even have a person. It wasn't even like they were trying to hit a person from the sounds of it, because he had jumped out of the van. So they were just firing into a van that could have been filled with people.
Yeah, it's funny. And once again, another disclaimer here. We're not trying to put this blanket statement that all police officers are reckless like this, because there are some quite a few good ones out there. So I don't want to throw that blanket statement out there. But speaking of reckless, looking at the comments on this, it's like, yeah, of course the cops are reckless. They have no one to account for, the comments on this article. It drew me to an article, some stuff that's been going on here in New Hampshire, which are the state troopers and local police officers are currently cracking down on distracted driving, people texting, talking on their cell phone, eating food, etc. Police officers are currently trying to crack down. They're having this whole campaign to crack down on them. You look at the comments on the news articles that are talking about this, 95% of them or so are saying the police officers are the most distracted drivers on the road who don't use their turn signal, oftentimes are speeding without their emergency lights on, always on their cell phone, and or their computer.
I'll say I have seen, I mean, I'm not going to single out any officers, although I could, or any particular department, because, you know, it could be the state police, could be the sheriff's department, could be the Keene police.
Yeah.
Won't say who it was. Maybe it was all of them. But I've seen a lot of police officers either typing, you know, when I'm in the rotary in the middle of Keene, and our viewers in other states might not know, but there's a roundabout, there's a rotary in the center of town. And when the police officers go by you in there, you can see when they're typing on their laptop while driving.
Oh yeah,
or when
all
you're
the
talking
time.
on your cell phone. I realize that there are certain functions of the job that require you to use equipment, but do you really have to type on a laptop while driving? Because I'll point out that before it was illegal, I did that once in a vehicle.
How safe was that?
No, it's extremely distracting.
Well, they're highly trained officers.
I didn't hit anything.
They
but
know how
that
to type on the computer, talk on the cell phone, and steer with their knee while they shoot at vans that are backfiring.
There's a special course for typing on
Anyways,
laptops while you drive.
the point of what we're saying here is, how about the police officers as a whole unit, not just a few of them, as a whole unit crack down and be the examples, the exemplary citizens here, because a lot of the time it's often seems like the law doesn't apply to them. And here on the show, we've said it many times, and the good cops out there will back us up on this. If anything, police officers should be held to a higher standard, not a lesser standard. Anyways, we do need to move on, Nick. We have other stories to get to, some humorous, some not so humorous. Let's go over to California, where a young schoolboy has been told that he can no longer have his American flag attached to his bicycle when he rides it to school, or at least when he parks his bike at the school.
Right. This is coming from, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but Denair, California. A Stanislaus County school is forcing a student to take an American flag off his bike. 13-year-old Cody Alicier put the flag there as a show of support for the veterans and his family, but officials at Denair Middle School told him he couldn't fly it. He said he was told some students, other students, had complained, so now the 8th grader has to actually fold up the flag and put it in his backpack when he goes into the school. Now, the principal here is saying, or I'm sorry, the superintendent says that the reason they're doing this is to prevent any kind of incidents, namely racial tension. Although he says, I'll read the quote here, he says it in such a politically correct and sort of warmed over way that it's not even really English. Our Hispanic, kids will, bring their Mexican flags to school and they'll display it. I'll point out, if Mexican flags, you'd say display them, since we're trying to teach American school children English. And then, of course, the kids would do the American flag situation, and it does cause kind of a racial tension, which we really don't want. We want them to appreciate the cultures.
Now,
it's not even English.
No. what I like, is there the quote about the First Amendment? Did you have a
bachelor's degree?
Get the quote about the First Amendment in there, because that's the key piece to all of this, the responsibility of the First Amendment.
The First Amendment is important. We want the kids to respect it, understand it, and with that comes a responsibility.
So here's what he's saying. The First Amendment is important, and what it means is freedom of speech means stifling all speech,
Well,
both the American flag as well as the Mexican
And what's
flag.
really troubling here is whether the flags are causing racial tensions or not. And I'm not going to argue the law here because there are court rulings that say
Sure.
that schools can
Disruptive. If
right,
there's a
can
disruptive thing
restrict
going
any
on.
kind of symbolic speech that's disruptive.
Fair enough.
I'm not saying I necessarily agree with the court rulings there, because to me it seems like if you've got students who can't handle the display of the American or the Mexican flag, if they're being disruptive in school, deal with those students.
Yeah.
Give them a detention, suspend
this
them,
is-
expel them, whatever you have to do.
Use it as a teachable
Right,
moment. This
right.
is what schools are for, Nick, is for cultures to kind of all mesh together and learn from each other. Yeah, it's not always going to look perfect. It's not always going to be perfect, but that's how you become tolerant of different cultures.
Right,
It's
that's
not
how
by-
a melting pot works.
It's not by suppressing the
There has to be
Mexican
some heat
flag
there.
and then suppressing the American flag and then suppressing all flags in general. No, that's not going to help cultures come together. If anything, that's just going to
But that's-
say, don't talk about your cultures. We're all going to just be black and white here. There's
Well, don't say black and white.
well, I didn't mean
say
it as the
grace.
racial. Sorry.
Say grayscale or something. But yeah, I mean, what concerns me is that this isn't just happening with schools. I mean, you're seeing it most notably in schools, but with this kind of political correctness, there are a lot of people out there who seem to want to try to do away with anything.
Whitewash the whole thing.
Right.
Is
Just-
that another
yeah.
bad one, whitewash?
I don't know. It's hard to tell with political correctness. But the point is, a lot of people would rather just nobody be offended. If you have a society where you're just stifling any kind of speech that's at all offensive to anybody, you have a very boring and a very unenlightened society.
Right.
I mean, you don't have an informed citizenry, especially when you're teaching kids. You're not saying, oh, we're going to teach these kids, who in this case are 13, 14 years old, that they need to be tolerant and respectful of other people and not make a scene because somebody else flies
This is
a
what you're
flag.
teaching them. You're teaching them you're not allowed to have your
Right.
American flag because the Mexican kids will get mad at you.
And you're also
Oh, well then I don't like the Mexican
and you're
kids.
also saying to all the students, you're saying you're just not I mean, that's the kind of citizen you're creating. You're just not responsible enough to handle free speech.
Right.
So we're not even going to allow you to attempt it until you're 18 years old. Or if you go to college, a lot of post-secondary institutions have rules now, and there's semi-private institutions, but most of them are basically state-funded. A lot of them have rules now that are just as restrictive as secondary schools, as high schools, as far as what you can and can't say, and with these kinds of restrictions to prevent disruptions. Usually it's not quite as severe as
a
with
lot of
high
the time
schools.
it's like what you can display in a window, say on campus dormitory or something like that.
But the whole attitude is, oh, well, we'll just teach America's young people that they're too stupid and too bestial to be able to get along with each other and act like
Right.
civilized human beings and have an enlightened conversation with someone with whom they might agree.
Yeah, at the
disagree,
same
I should say.
Yes, at the same time, in the same sentence saying the First Amendment is important, but you're not allowed to exercise it. But it's important, but you're not allowed to exercise it.
It's important to suppress it.
It's important to suppress. Is that what we're teaching the young kids? Is at a very young age? I guess so. In this case, it's almost like this
I think I think there's a reason it's called political correctness.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, it is an indoctrination. It really is. I don't think that's the way that teachers are approaching it. I'm not saying I'm sure we have teachers out there
My
watching.
wife's a teacher.
Yeah.
I work in a
I'm not
school.
saying that on the ground level that's how it's being approached
No, those are the
by
foot
educators.
soldiers.
Yeah.
And they all mean, I think that
Right.
for the most part, yes, there's good and bad in every profession, but for the most part, teachers mean good and they want to help teach children.
Right.
I think that's most people in the educational field go to.
I'm not sure that that's necessarily what most people working for the Department of Education
Okay,
are going
that's-
for.
that's
I don't
not what
think
I'm
it's
talking about.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying
Talking
my
about
problem
the foot soldiers,
right.
the people on the ground, the
And
people
even
down
most
with the
of the
people.
administration on
Yeah.
a school level or an SAU, whatever you call it, where you are level. Most of them, they just want to teach kids.
Yeah, they want the best for kids.
If you look at the way the public education system was set up and what it was designed to do, the intention behind it, the way it was set up in the United States, it was to, at least to some extent, to act as an indoctrination center, and
Well,
that
sure.
is certainly
It's
true.
teach people to be workers. I mean, there's no hiding that. It's to teach the next generation how to fall in line and have a lower class, middle
And
class,
not
and upper class,
question
and how
things
to
very
be
much.
workers.
They really don't like. I mean,
Now, that's not, though, what the ground people are trying to do. I know it's not. I know they're putting in programs trying to enlighten people and bring out the best education, but a lot of it is stifled by federal programs, especially like the newer ones like No Child Left Behind and stuff. It really does stifle the person,
you
the
teach
teacher.
to a test and you don't
yeah,
ask.
right,
It
exactly.
doesn't matter whether the kids learn anything or,
Sure.
or more importantly,
So it's
learn
like
anything
trying to-
useful that they're going to use in their real
Trying
life.
to teach with both hands tied behind your back, essentially. So I don't think that's not what we're saying when we're poo-pooing on some of the stuff that's going on in the educational system. It's more
I think
of
there's
what
some very deep flaws with the system.
Oh,
and I think a lot of
absolutely.
teachers would agree with you, whether they
Oh,
say
yeah.
so publicly or not.
Absolutely, but it's on this political level when you're looking at the political side of where it comes from.
It'd be nice to get Washington out of education entirely. Maybe leave it to
They weren't in
states
it.
or
Amazingly enough,
localities. to do.
before 19, I think it's 65. The federal government wasn't even involved in the education.
And
Isn't-
it seems like there were public schools before then. It
did
seems
they
like people were
function?
educated. People could read and do math.
Yeah, my parents attended those schools, and they're both smart people. Huh? How did that work out? Anyways, we do need to move on, Nick. After we take this break, we are going to be talking about a couple different things. We're going to have an update on road signs. The federal government, we report on a story about how they were forcing New York City to replace all their road signs. Well, it looks like it's going to be pretty much every road sign in the entire nation. We'll be getting into that story, as well as a barbershop raid. Actually, quite a few barbershop raids
barbershops, yeah.
with armed men going into barbershops and cracking down on unlicensed
Well, it
barbers.
didn't happen to me yesterday because I was at the barbershop.
Was he a licensed man? Did you make
I'm
sure you
pretty
saw
sure.
his certificate?
I don't care because
Probably
I don't enforce these
Hung
things,
it
but I'm pretty
proudly on
sure.
the wall. Anyways, some barbers, can you believe this? Some barbers out there, they don't go through the proper licensing requirements. And we're going to report on this story and tell you what the government is doing to make sure that your hair is kept safe. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. This is Free Minds TV. And welcome back to the show. It is still Toby here with you.
And still Nick.
We'd like to invite you to log on to our website, freemindstv.com, freemindsmedia.org, however you want to get there. It doesn't really matter. Once you're there, you have all the archives. You have the radio show, you have blogs, you have hundreds of hours of content, Nick. Probably thousands of hours of content dating back for years and years and years. We are now officially, Nick, on our 5th year of Free Minds TV.
I was looking at that actually. I was looking in the archives.
Yeah. Back November 2000, what would that be, 6?
5.
5? Anyways,
5.
It's been a long time we've been doing the show. So that's all up on our website, freemindstv.com. And if you really like it, consider throwing us a couple bucks. But you don't need to. Economy's bad. We understand. Anyways, Nick, we don't mind running in the red for a little while longer. Until it picks back up, then the riches will flow
Hopefully
right
it
in.
will pick back up. But
And
we're not
then-
having an economic conversation in tonight's show. So.
Right, no economic doom and gloom. It's going to pick up, and then we'll be rich from the show. So we're not worrying about that. You have the money, send it to us. If you don't, we'll pick up the tab until then. All right, Nick, we do have more content to get into. We are going to be talking about how the government's keeping your hair safe in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about street signs. Yes, street signs. They cost a lot of money to make. You know, it's for most street signs, it's well over $100 to put up just a little street sign that says Arch Street or Row Ave. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank coming up with the creative names here.
Maple Ave. is a
Maple
common-
Ave.
There's
Any-
Tree Streets.
Tree Streets.
Bird Streets.
Bird Streets. Anyways,
President Streets.
whatever it is, Washington Streets. The point is, these signs are rather expensive to make, and then it takes more time to put them in the ground. But despite being so costly at over $100 a piece, the federal government has said by the year 2015, these road signs must be replaced. Why, you ask? These road signs are doing a perfectly good job displaying the names of some of the streets. Well, in an 816 plus page document released by the under Federal Highway Administration FHWA Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Yes, this mammoth behemoth of a document states that all street signs must have certain lettering, certain words capitalized, certain words not capitalized. They like the first one, like W in Washington should be capitalized, and then the rest lowercase. except street should be capitalized, just the S in street. You know, caps, lowercase, like in grammar. Well, the problem is most of the street signs in the United States are all caps, including the federal signs. There's also other problems, of course, such as
caps does mean shouting.
Sure, it does. We don't want street signs to be shouting at people, thinking that the street signs are angry at them, especially these old folks, baby boomers. That is mentioned in this document, one of the reasons why they're doing it. I'll get to that. But first, I did want to go over, it's not just the capital letters, it's also the reflectiveness of the street signs. You got to make sure that if you're driving at night, you are completely blinded by the reflectiveness of these signs. Have you driven at night lately, Nick, especially when there's a little water on the ground?
Yeah.
Man, it is hard to see. That's for me, with my peepers. I know for some people the reflective is helpful, but for me, it makes my
actually,
eyeballs hurt.
I mean, when you're driving in the city and you've got that glare from rain, a lot of times, just the reflection of the street signs in the road is a pain in the butt.
Anyways, they're making sure that those are much more reflective in this 816-page document. They've got to have a certain amount.
This was all about the street signs, this 816-page document. Because I'm reading the Federalist Papers right now, which I would recommend to most of you out there who like what we talked about.
Not before you get into this 1816-page document, though. How about? Let's get this.
The debate over whether to adopt and ratify the U.S. Constitution is less than 816 pages.
That's a good point.
But they can actually write that much about street signs?
Well,
it
also talks about like the don't walk signs and stuff.
So you mean like the electric signs?
Traffic control devices. Street lights, sure. They have to have LEDs now and stuff. Anyways, the reason they're doing this, of course, in the tune of billions of dollars, that's unfunded mandate, of course, but even if it was funded, that's all coming out of your and I pockets anyways. It's federal money. Where do they get their money? They get it from us. Then they give some of it back to us. So unfunded mandate, billions of dollars to cash-strapped communities here, and they're doing it. One of the primary reasons that they mention they're doing this, because baby boomers are getting old. It's hard for them to read those street signs if they're in all caps. I don't believe that. The federal government says it in this 816-page document. I'm not buying it. And even if I was, by how much? Is it worth it? I don't know. Is it really harder to read a sign if it's in all caps than if it's in lowercase?
Seems counterintuitive to me.
Stop signs? Are they going to stop?
Yeah, it's going to. Well, number one, I think it looks weird. Number two, when did it become the federal government, we were just talking in the first part of the show about how they've gotten directly involved in education. So basically, your local school, well, like half the spending they have to do and a bunch of the stupid crap that's counterproductive that they have to do, it's all federally mandated. The same thing happens with highways or streets in cities. I mean, we're here in Keene, New Hampshire. Doesn't it seem like the city of Keene, New Hampshire, or the state of New Hampshire, doesn't it seem like that's bringing things up sufficiently in terms of
we'll figure
in terms of political levels instead of saying we need to go to Washington
to figure out the
and
street
make sure
sign.
that half of this continent has a uniform system of street signs, even if it costs billions of dollars.
Right. Meanwhile, social programs falling like.
Who has time to think about things like
who
that?
does? The guy who invented the font that's being used, the guy who manufactures signs.
The other thing, how much do we pay people? This is an 816-page document, and I'm sure it's full of all kinds of technical BS about what kind of material it has to be, how many lumens of blah, 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 reflectivity, blah, blah, blah. I bet there were dozens of people who worked on this for a year or more.
Probably cost millions of dollars.
And this is where your tax dollars go. This is where your tax dollars go.
And then they're going to go to rake across billions more to replace. Now, I do want to throw this out there, Nick. Real quick, full disclosure here. A lot of these signs are going to be wearing out and have to be replaced anyways. So they're just requiring a different mandating a certain sign to replace the old one. So a lot of the street signs can be replaced in that manner. Not all of them, of course. It's still going to cost them a lot of money because by 2015 they're supposed to be replaced according to this document coming from USA Today. So we'll see. It is ridiculous, though. I mean, man, why does someone in Washington have to decide what my street sign looks like down here on this local level or in the boondocks where it's mind-boggling. This is where
it seems as insane as Washington trying to tell Canada what kind of street signs.
And in reality, I bet if you trace the dollars back, the people who were lobbying for this are the people who are creating the street signs. This is a big money-making deal. We talked about with the Recovery Act.
This is much bigger than the Recovery Act.
That was only millions of dollars going towards these street sign manufacturers. This is billions. Anyways, It sounds funny, doesn't it? That
And the public works workers
there's
will have to
like
put them up,
there's like all this
overtime.
shady backdoor deals being made for street signs because it's in the tune of billions of dollars. Anyways, Nick, we do need to move along. We don't have much time for it, but let's get into how the government is protecting your hair from those unlicensed barbers.
All right. Well, this is coming from Orange County, and this is a somewhat dated story because it was coming out late August, early September this year. But we're just finding out about it now.
Well, it's making the news, Nick, real quick, because now the department is saying, oh, well, there's a lot of uproar about it, I think, right now.
But
so
the
it's
actual
coming back.
events are a couple months
Sure.
old. So I don't want people to, like, rush to CNN or Fox or
Right.
whoever you get your news from and try to find this story because it's not going to be in the top news stories.
We'll post
for this
it up
week.
on our show content page so people can take a look at it, though, and find more links.
As many as 14 armed Orange County deputies, including narcotics agents, stormed Strictly Skills Barbershop during business hours on a Saturday in August, handcuffing barbers in front of customers during a busy back-to-school weekend. It was just one of a series of unprecedented raid-style, they don't call them raids, raid-style inspections. I guess that's a new term for armed police raids. The Orange County Sheriff's Office recently conducted with a state regulating agency, targeting several predominantly black and Hispanic-owned barbershops in the Pine Hills area. In sweeps on August 21st and September 17th, targeting at least 9 shops, deputies arrested 37 people, the majority charged with barbering without a license, a misdemeanor that the state records show only 3 other people have been jailed for in Florida in the past 10 years. This was a pretext to go in. They point out here in the story that they actually went in, these armed deputies who work for the county, they're law enforcement officers, they went in with the Department of Business and Professional Regulation inspectors because the inspectors don't need a warrant to go in. And the deputies didn't get one either. Like they're piggybacking the drug searches on this licensing
Yeah, I hear they didn't even find many drugs, too.
Well, they said they arrested only three other, they say that, I think they say that only 3 or 4 of the people they arrested were arrested for anything but the barbering without a
It just
license
is
charge.
amazing that the government is in charge of who can cut hair and who can't cut hair. Why is that something the government's getting involved with? If my wife cuts my hair, is she going to get arrested for this?
Well, she doesn't charge you money. It's not a profession. You can do it at home.
She cuts her brother's hair. He pays $5 for it. So is she? Oh, well, I said that on the air. So we're going to get a raid now. Damn it.
It's hard to prove these things.
Done for. Mike, I'm done for. I mean, no, but seriously, why is the government getting involved in this crap? Why is that their job? Why are we hiring, I'm sure this, 14 armed men for an entire day, then prosecuting these people? This is going to cost tens and tens of thousands of dollars. Not to mention severely hurting these people, hurting businesses, of course, except for the licensed barbers who are protected by all of this. But why is the government involved in this? Please, somebody tell me why. Why do we need this? It's hair. You get a bad haircut, you're not going to go back. Hair grows back. We'll get over this.
Yeah. New Hampshire, there was a protest that took place over the licensing laws for barbering and cosmetology here in New Hampshire.
Civil disobedience.
Several years ago at this point, really. And they did cut the number of required training hours in half.
Yeah, it's only like 850 now.
It was some ridiculous amount.
Anyways, Nick, we're out of time. You have an answer, different opinion for us, FMTV at freemindsmedia.org, or log on to our website. Click on the contact button. Everything else is up there as well, freemindsmedia.org or freemindstv.com. Until next week, it has been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a good week.